Hello and welcome. My name is Tarmo Ramel, and today I want to give you a few little tricks on using conditional formatting in Excel to help elevate your data game. If you're interested in other Excel tips and tricks or things related to remote sensing, GIS, spatial analysis, be sure to check out my YouTube channel and click subscribe so that you don't miss new content. All right, what we have on the screen here above me is some demo data that was downloaded from a website online. It's free demo data. If I just make it a little bit bigger, you can see I've put the URL here up in the top corner for you, and I'll link to it in the description down below so that you too can access this data set. Completely fabricated, but class data, students. What I'd like to do is elevate it so that you can get some additional information pulled out of this rather than having to interpret all the values at their face value. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the grades that all of these students got in a math class. And we can look at the numbers, we have them as a percentage, it's great, but I might be curious, who did really well? So I can head over to the home ribbon, the conditional formatting, hit the button and hit down here to top bottom rules and say let's take the top 10% of students. It's going to open up a pop-up window, and rather than making the top students show up in red, let's fill them in green. We can also change that percentage. It doesn't have to be 10%, but that's the default, so let's leave that in for now. We hit OK, and immediately these three students show up as being the top 10% in that class. We can do the same thing for this class in physics. So we head over here to the top bottom rules. Let's take the top 10%. We're going to head over here, change this back to green, hit OK, and we'll do the same thing here for these marks in chemistry. So conditional formatting, top bottom rules, top 10%, and change the color scheme to green. This is really great. We can see who the top earners are, but we can do the same thing and also highlight, let's say, the bottom 10%. So we do the same. We go to top bottom rules, top bottom rules, and we'll take the bottom 10%, and these ones perhaps we'll leave in red. We'll do the same for this column, conditional formatting, top bottom rules, bottom 10%, and select OK, and we do the same thing for chemistry. Top bottom rules, bottom 10%, and we'll click OK. The really nice thing about this is that this formatting is conditional to the values that are in the cells. And if the values in the cells change, the formatting adapts automatically. What do I mean by that? Well, imagine we took Jane Smith here, who got 88 in physics, and imagine that they only got 15%. So if I type in 15%, notice that immediately they're now in that lower 10%. So these things will adjust based on the data in the table, meaning that as your data changes, the formatting highlights the things that you want to highlight without you having to go back in and change them. So that's one really useful thing that I like to do. The other thing that I like to do is to create a special toggle. So let's call it toggle. Let's highlight one of these previously formatted styles and head up here to the format painter, select it, and then select the cell that we want to format just so that it all looks consistent. And let's use a 1 or a 0 in this cell to indicate whether or not the people are enrolled in the class. So currently all of these students are enrolled in the class, and what we want to do is that if the student drops the class, that they are shown with a gray bar across the page. And we could do this also with conditional formatting. So what I'm going to do So I'm going to highlight all of the data in the table. We're going to head up here to conditional formatting, and we're going to choose new rule. That opens up this sub-menu, and rather than using the two color style, we're going to head down to classic, and then we are going to use a formula to determine which cells to format. The formula is going to look at the values in column A and test whether or not they are set to 0, 0 being when they've dropped the class. So we start with a function A. We're always going to look at column A. In this case, we're going to start at row number 9, and we are going to test whether or not it's equal to 0. If it is, we're going to custom format those cells so that they're all shaded in gray. So now, if this value in column A is a 0, the formatting of the cells becomes gray. And hit OK. Notice that nothing's happened because currently all of these students are enrolled in the class. But what if this student here drops the class and I put in a 0? Notice that it now puts this gray line nicely through and reminds me that these people are no longer enrolled in the class. That's really great. Gives me a visual of who performed well and who's not performing well, who is enrolled in the class and who is not. But there's one additional thing, is that the fact that these person got 77 or 89 or 84% in the class, maybe what I want to do is remove them from a calculation of an overall average grade for the class. So if I put in the average grade for all of these students into this cell, I'm going to use bold. We can select it up here, or on a Windows machine you can do Control B. On a Mac you can use Command B. It'll bold that. And then just to keep things nice and neat, let's put a line that separates the data from this summary. So this is a overall average, and again I'll make that bold. Maybe I'll just slide that over to the right hand side. So what I want to do is drop these grades from students that have dropped the class from being included in this overall average. So the easy way to do that is to head over to our first percentage. So this is cell G9, and we see that the equation that's in there is already populated, but I'm going to use an if then else function. I'm going to say if this cell is equal to 0, comma, the value if that condition is true, I'm going to put in 2 quotation marks. It's going to make it blank, comma, otherwise I'm going to calculate this sum. And I close the bracket at the end to close the if statement. And I hit enter. So nothing really changed there, but if I went over here and I dropped this student out of the class, notice that their percentage now disappears. So I'm going to put them back in for the time being. I'm then going to take this and I'm simply going to drag it all the way down. I overwrote my little bar, so I'll put that back in. And notice that everybody that's dropped the course now has their final grade missing. So as I go in here and drop people from my calculation, this value here will eventually start to change to reflect what's happening in these grades. Just to illustrate quickly, if I were to go in here and add some really high grades and drop some other grades out, notice that the overall average is now adjusting. And depending on the number of decimal places and the distribution of grades, those values may change more rapidly or more slowly, but it is a way of keeping track of who's in the class, who's not in the class, to visually represent that quickly on the screen, but then to also highlight who the top and the bottom individuals are in the class. And if you go up into this conditional formatting toolbar, you'll notice that there are a whole series of other ways by which we can also summarize the data by increasing the information content in each cell. We can add icons and colors and formatting and even little bar charts within each cell that tell us how these individuals are doing. So for example, we highlight this cell, we go to conditional formatting, and we choose data bars. Maybe we'll choose something like these that are blue. Let's choose these ones. And we can see that the bar inside each cell is going to be wider to the right if the grade is higher. It's going to be a little bit more to the left if it's lower. So if these person here did really poorly in the class, notice that their bar then is going to be much smaller. So again, simply providing a visual cue to help us interpret the data that's in the file. So conditional formatting, lots of interesting tips and tricks and ways to explore your data and to summarize that information. Stay tuned for more. We'll be back shortly.